Ask for a definition of Christian doctrine today, and you'll get a list of faith statements, dictionary definitions, or basic slogans like Jesus saves. Society accepts this as the baseline. Doctrine is a collection of propositions you choose to believe. For centuries, the institutional weight of historical creeds and confessions has reinforced this idea. We treat them as the unshakable standard for Christian teaching. But if this 2,000-year consensus is actually built on a humanly engineered concept rather than the original apostolic teaching, then the foundation of the faith is not what we assume it to be. Defining doctrine as a human proposition changes the entire Christian truth system. It becomes a fragile scaffold of abstract ideas. To understand what was lost, we must trace doctrine back from our modern consensus to its first-century origin. Without the original definition of doctrine, the faith remains an echo chamber, a system where we debate human ideas rather than witnessing reality. The path to our modern definition runs directly through the 19th century. Philosophers like Immanuel Kant and Friedrich Schleiermacher rejected the possibility of having objective, demonstrable knowledge of the divine. Schleiermacher redefined religion as a matter of religious feeling and inward experience. In his view, doctrine wasn't a description of historical facts, it was a verbal account of the believer's emotional state and their pious feeling of dependence on the divine. This coincided with Hegelian philosophy, which viewed truth not as a fixed historical reality, but as an evolving concept emerging through human consciousness. The idea became the reality, while historical facts were treated as mere symbols of that internal thought. This mechanical shift changed the purpose of doctrine. It was no longer expected to be a self-attesting reality. Instead, it became a human-crafted tool designed to facilitate a specific inward experience or a structured belief system. This focus on internal experience and conceptual frameworks persists even in traditional conservative circles. When doctrine is presented as a set of conclusions requiring mental assent, rather than a disclosure of prophetic fulfillment, it is operating on this same subjectivist blueprint. Our modern understanding of doctrine relies on the intellectual and emotional effort of the believer to make it true, rather than the intrinsic evidence of the divine event itself. This drift toward human-centered teaching appeared as early as the late 1st century. The Didache, an ancient church manual, provides an early example of how Christian teaching began to separate from its original foundation. The Didache lists various moral commands and church orders, but it omits the prophetic context that the apostles always used as their primary evidence. It presents the way of life without the specific revelatory events that made that life possible. This moved the faith toward virtue ethics, where the focus is on performing the right behaviors. In this model, the act of doing right is treated as the substance of righteousness, mirroring Greco-Roman philosophy rather than apostolic revelation. Contrast this with Christ's original use of the word didachē, or doctrine. In the Sermon on the Mount, he does not offer ethics for the sake of ethics. Christ warns of false prophets who perform miracles and cast out demons in his name. He rejects them not because their outward actions or slogans were wrong, but because their doctrine lacked the necessary divine origin and prophetic containment. Christ's teaching establishes a strict sequence. The primary clause is the historical fact that he is the one foretold by the prophets. The moral actions commanded in the sermon are secondary. They are the result of believing that specific disclosure. True doctrine flows from this supernatural historical fulfillment. It is a form of knowledge that could only come from a divine source. In contrast, moralism and propositional creeds rely on human creativity and mental effort. First-century didachē is the record of God entering human history. It is the testimony of a divine plan demonstrated through physical, historical fulfillment, witnessed and recorded as an undeniable reality. Doctrine is not a theory to be voted upon, nor is it a set of ideas we agree to uphold. These are human constructs, and they disintegrate when they are not anchored to anything beyond our own reasoning. True doctrine is an objective phenomenon. It is the testimony of God's plan being demonstrated and fulfilled in the sight of witnesses. This is the reality of Christ as the definitive end of history. This is the core requirement. no messianic prophecy, no Christ. Without the prophetic reality, we are left with nothing but abstract ideas. We are merely echoing human thoughts into a void, following a version of Christ that exists only in our concepts and feelings. Take the time to audit your own faith. Determine whether you are standing on a fragile scaffold of human propositions, or if you are following the historic, self-attesting reality of the Word made flesh.